What is happening in Al-Fashir right now is no less than a calculated campaign of destruction. This is happening after 18 months of a very violent and brutal siege on Al-Fashir that has starved the population to the point that civilians in Al-Fashir resorted to eating animal food for months to survive. Those people were bombed, those people were attacked even as they were praying. And now, this past week, we've just seen an explosion of violence deliberately targeting civilians as they were trying to hide and escape in Al-Fashir, and as they were trying to flee towards Tawila, which is sort of like the safest place out of Al-Fashir right now. So right now, since the beginning of the war, we actually have no official and clear death toll for several reasons. One is because the war is happening for the past 2 years and a half in a country very vast like Sudan, where there is literally half of the country in a blackout. What I mean by a blackout, it's like there is no actual telecommunication, there is no access to telephone services, and barely access to internet. So that makes reporting death and reporting killing extremely difficult. That's one. Second, also because the hospital, the medical infrastructure has completely collapsed in many parts of Sudan. So there is not actually, a medical system able to record death. And finally, it's also because people don't only die by bullets and by shelling and by execution, but they also die because of more undercover deaths, such as malnutrition, hunger, communicable disease. People who don't reach the hospital or any medical facility whatsoever because these have been destroyed, because there is a conflict, etc. So we actually do not know, neither for the Sudan war or Al-Fashir, how many people have died. But a lot of researchers have estimated that it is more than 100,000 of people, and that was even like months ago. So we're looking at like a dramatic death toll on civilians. Over these past 500 days, there's been no humanitarian aid reaching Al-Fashir. The warring parties have prevented Al-Fashir from receiving any assistance. Even traders were trying to, bring food to the market. Even volunteers were trying to smuggle in some food for people who were starving, were attacked. Some of them killed, some of them, disappeared. So it's been extremely difficult for people in Al-Fashir to receive any help, and they have been relying on some local organization and especially also some local volunteers who've been bravely and sometimes and often, I would say, risking their lives every day to try and save people. But this has been really at their expense. That's one. And second, not to the scale that is needed. And that has been needed. So at the moment also, no one has access to Al-Fashir as these attacks are ongoing and as this starvation is continuing. At the moment, we are calling for protection of civilians and protection of people fleeing. It is absolutely unacceptable that people are being attacked, looted, executed, detained as they try to flee Al-Fashir. There are rules in war, and one of them is to make sure that civilians and civilian infrastructure are not being attacked, and this is not respected. And this is a joint call from NRC, but also from a lot of other humanitarian organizations. We are also calling for the humanitarian access to be given to places where people are, especially in places where people have fled to, in between Al-Fashir and Tawila, and that we are still not accepting at the moment. To be very frank with you, the international community has systematically neglected the crisis in Sudan, despite the fact that this is one of the largest, if not the largest, humanitarian crisis in the world right now. We have 30 million people in need. We have 25 million people hungry. This is a crisis where the numbers don't even make sense because of their magnitude. And right now we have atrocities ongoing. And yet there hasn't been, summits, there hasn't been any momentum from the international community at higher level to try and pressure the warring parties and the backers to protect civilians and then also to allow humanitarian to work in Sudan. Another signal as well is the fact that right now, the humanitarian community needs 4 billion in order to respond to the crisis in Sudan. 70% of this is a gap. It means it hasn't been dispersed. What it means is that underground organizations like mine have to make terrible choice, try to choose between the most vulnerable of the most vulnerable to see who will receive assistance. And this is something that cannot continue, especially at a time where we see risk escalating and suffering up to the roof. What we know for sure is that the suffering of the people in Sudan is not over. Actually, it is very likely to go worse and the atrocities are not ending. We are very worried about the fact that only a few thousands of people have reached Tawila, while we actually know that there's tens of thousands of people who trying to flee al-Fashir, and there are an unknown number of civilians still stuck right now in the city. They're unaccounted for, they're disappeared, they may be killed, they may be detained, and we fear for their safety and for their survival. So no, this is not over for Sudan, sadly. There is also ongoing conflict right now in the Kordofan with cities in the Kordofan are being besieged, people who are struggling to eat on a daily basis because of the use of starvation and siege as a weapon of war. So right now, what we need is more attention on Sudan, more international attention, diplomatic attention, as well as financial attention and support for the humanitarian response.